The next morning, at daybreak, Morgana went to an old cobbler who she knew to be always early to his stall, and, bidding him good morrow, put a piece of gold into his hand, saying, "Baba Mufasa, you must bring with you your sewing tackle and come with me, but I must tell you I shall blindfold you when you come to such a place." Baba Mufasa seemed to hesitate a little at these words. Oh, replied he, "you would have me do something against my conscience or against my honor?" "God forbid," said Morgana, putting another piece of gold into his hands, "that I should ask for anything that is contrary to your honor. Only come along with me and fear nothing." Baba Mufasa went with Morgana, who, after she had bound his eyes with a handkerchief at the place she had mentioned, conveyed him to her deceased master's house, and never unloosened his eyes till he had entered the room where she had put the corpse together. "Baba Mufasa," said she, "you must make haste and sew the parts of this body together, and when you have done, I will give you another piece of gold." After Baba Mufasa had finished his task, she blindfolded him again, and gave him a third piece of gold as she had promised, and, recommending secrecy to him, carried him back to the place where she had first bound his eyes, and pulled off the bandage, and let him go home, but watched him that he returned toward his stall, till he was quite out of sight, for fear that he should have the curiosity to return and follow her. Then she went home. Morgana, on her return, warmed some water to wash the body, and at the same time AliBaba perfumed it with incense, and wrapped it in the burying clothes with the accustomed ceremonies. Not long after, the proper officer brought the bier, and, when the attendants of the mosque, whose business it was to wash the dead, offered to perform their duty, she told them that it was already done. Shortly after this, the imam and the other ministers of the mosque arrived. 4 neighbors carried the corpse to the burying ground, following the imam, who recited some prayers. AliBaba came after with some neighbors, who often relieved the others in carrying the bier to the burying ground. Morgana, a slave to the deceased, followed the procession, weeping, beating her breasts, and tearing her hair. Cassim's wife stayed home mourning, uttering lamentable cries with the women of the neighborhood, who came, according to custom, during the funeral, and, joining their lamentations with hers, filled the quarter far and near with sounds of sorrow. In this manner, Cassim's melancholy death was concealed and hushed up, between AliBaba, his widow, and Morgana, his slave, with so much contrivance that nobody in the city had the least knowledge or suspicion of the cause of it. 3 or 4 days after the funeral, AliBaba removed his few goods openly to his sister-in-law's house, in which it was agreed he should live in the future. But the money he had taken from the robbers he conveyed thither by night. As for Cassim's warehouse, he entrusted it entirely to the management of his eldest son. While these things were being done, the 40 robbers again visited their retreat in the forest. Great then was their surprise to find Cassim's body taken away, with some of their bags of gold. "We are certainly discovered," said the captain. "The removal of the body and the loss of some of our money plainly shows that the man whom we killed had an accomplice, and for our own lives' sake we must try to find him. What say you, my lads?" All the robbers unanimously approved of the captain's proposal. "Well," said the captain, "one of you, the boldest and most skillful among you, must go into town, disguised as a traveler and a stranger, to try if he can hear any talk of a man whom we have killed, and endeavor to find out who he was and where he lived. It is a matter of the first importance, and for fear of any treachery, I propose that whoever undertakes this business without success, even if the failure arises only from an error of judgment, shall suffer death." Without waiting for the sentiments of his companions, one of the robbers started up and said, "I submit to this condition, and think it is an honor to expose my life to serve the troop." After this robber had received great commendations from the captain and his comrades, he disguised himself so that nobody would take him for what he was, and, taking leave of the troop that night, went into town just at daybreak, and walked up and down, till accidentally he came to Baba Mustafa's stall, which was always open before any of the other shops. Baba Mufasa was seated with an awl in his hand, just going to work. The robber saluted him, bidding him good morrow, and perceived that he was old, and said, "Honest man, you begin work very early. Is it possible that one of your age can see so well? I question, even if it were somewhat lighter, whether you could see to stitch." "You do not know me," replied Baba Mufasa. "For as old as I am, I have extraordinarily good eyes, and you will not doubt it when I tell you I sewed the body of a dead man together in a palace where I had not so much light as I have now." "A dead body?" exclaimed the robber with affected amazement. Yes, answered Baba Mufasa. You see, I see you want to have me speak out, but you shall know no more. The robber felt sure that he had discovered what he sought. He pulled out a piece of gold, and putting it into Baba Mufasa's hand, said to him, I do not want to learn your secret, though I can assure you you might safely trust me with it. The only thing I desire of you is to show me the house where you stitched up the dead body. If I were disposed to do you that favor, replied Baba Mufasa, I assure you I cannot. I was taken to a certain place whence I was led blindfolded to the house, and afterward brought back again in the same manner. You see, therefore, the impossibility of my doing what you desire. Well, replied the robber, you may, however, remember a little of the way that you were led blindfolded. Come, let me blind your eyes at the same place. We will walk together, perhaps you may recognize some part, and as everybody ought to be paid for their trouble, there's another piece of gold for you. Gratify me in what I ask you. So saying, he put another piece of gold into his hand. The 2 pieces of gold were great temptations to Baba Mufasa. He looked at them a long time in his hand, without saying a word, but at last he pulled out his purse and put them in. I cannot promise, he said to the robber, that I can remember the way exactly, but since you desire, I will try what I can do. At these words, Baba Mustapha rose up, to the great joy of the robber, and led him to the place where Morgana had bound his eyes. It was here, said Baba Mustapha, that I was blindfolded, and I turned this way. The robber tied his handkerchief over his eyes, and walked by him till he stopped directly at Cassim's house, where AliBaba then lived. The thief, before he pulled off the band, marked the door with a piece of chalk, which he had ready in his hand. He then asked him if he knew whose house it was, to which Baba Mufasa replied that he did not live in the neighborhood. He could not tell. The robber, finding that he could discover no more from Baba Mufasa, thanked him for the trouble he had taken, and led him back to his stall. While he returned to the forest, persuaded that he should be very well received, a little after the robber and Baba Mufasa had parted, Morgana went out of AliBaba's house upon some errand, and upon her return, seeing the mark the robber had made, stopped to observe it. What can be the meaning of this mark? She said to herself. Somebody intends my master no good. However, with whatever intention it was done, it is advisable to guard against the worst. Accordingly, she fetched a piece of chalk, and marked 2 or 3 doors on each side in the same manner, without saying a word to her master or mistress. In the meantime, the robber rejoined his troop in the forest, and recounted to them his success, explaining upon his good fortune in meeting so soon with the only person who could inform him of what he wanted to know. All the robbers listened to him with the utmost satisfaction, when the captain, after commending his diligence, addressed himself to them all, and said, Comrades, we have no time to lose. Let us set off well armed, without its appearing who we are, that we may not excite any suspicion. Let only 1 or 2 go into town together, and join at our rendezvous, which shall be the great square. In the meantime, our comrade who brought us the good news, and I, will go and find out the house, that we may consult what is best done. This speech and plan was approved of by all, and they were soon ready. They filed off in parties of 2 each, after some interval of time, and got into the town without being in the least suspected. The captain, and he who had visited the town in the morning as a spy, came in last. He led the captain into the street where he had marked AliBaba's residence, and when they came to the first of the houses which Morgana had marked, he pointed it out. But the captain observed that the next door was chalked in the same manner and in the same place, and showing it to his guide, asked him which house it was, that one or the first one. The guide was so confounded that he knew not what answer to make, but still more puzzled when he and the captain saw 5 or 6 houses similarly marked. He assured the captain with an oath that he had marked but one, and could not tell who had chalked the rest, so that he could not distinguish the house which the cobbler had stopped at. The captain, finding that their design had proved abortive, went directly to the place of meeting, and told his troop that they had lost their labor, and must return to the cave. He himself set them the example, and they all returned as they had come. When the troop was all got together, the captain told them the reason of their returning, and presently the conductor was declared by all worthy of death. He condemned himself, acknowledging that he ought to have taken better precaution, and prepared to receive the stroke from him who was appointed to cut off his head. As the safety of the troop required the discovery of the second intruder into the cave, another of the gang, who promised himself that he should succeed better, presented himself, and, his offer being accepted, he went and corrupted Baba Mufasa as the other had done, and being shown the house, marked it in a place more remote from sight, with red chalk. Not long after, Morgana, from whose eyes nothing could escape, went out, and seeing the red chalk, and arguing with herself as she had done before, marked the other neighbors' houses in the same place and manner. The robber, at his return to his company, valued himself much on the precaution he had taken, which he looked upon as an infallible way of distinguishing AliBaba's house from the others, and the captain and all of them thought it must succeed. They conveyed themselves into the town with the same precaution as before, but when the robber and his captain came to the street, they found the same difficulty, at which the captain was enraged, and the robber in as great confusion as his predecessor. Thus, the captain and his troop were forced to retire a second time, and much more dissatisfied, while the robber who had been the author of the mistake underwent the same punishment, to which he willingly submitted. The captain, now having lost 2 brave fellows of his troop, was afraid of diminishing it too much by pursuing this plan to get information of the residence of the plunderer. He found by their example that their heads were not so good as their hands on such occasions, and therefore resolved to take upon himself the important commission. Accordingly, he went and addressed himself to Baba Mufasa, who did him the same service he had done to the other robbers. He did not set any particular mark upon the house, but examined and observed it so carefully by passing often by it that it was impossible for him to mistake it. The captain, well satisfied with his attempt, and informed of what he wanted to know, returned to the forest, and when he came into the cave, where the troop waited for him, he said, "Now, comrades, nothing can prevent our full revenge, as I am certain of the house, and in my way hither I have thought of how to put it into execution. But if anyone can form a better expedient, let him communicate it." He then told him his contrivance, and as they approved of it, ordered them to go into the village about and buy 19 mules with 38 large leather jars, one full of oil and the others empty. In 2 or 3 days' time, the robbers had purchased the mules and jars, and, as the mouths of the jars were rather too narrow for this purpose, the captain caused them to be widened, and, after having put one of his men into each, with weapons which he thought fit, leaving open the seam which had been undone to leave them room to breathe, he rubbed the jars on the outside with oil from the full vessel. Things being thus prepared, when the 19 mules were loaded with 37 robbers in jars, and the jar of oil, the captain, as their driver, set out with them, and reached the town by the dusk of the evening, as he had intended. He led them through the streets, till he came to AliBaba's, at whose door he desired to have knocked, but was prevented this by his sitting there after supper to take a little fresh air. He stopped his mules, addressing himself to him, and said, "I have brought some oil a great way to sell at tomorrow's market, and it is now so late that I do not know where to lodge. If I should not be troublesome to you, do me the favor to let me pass the night with you, and I shall be very much obliged by your hospitality." Though AliBaba had seen the captain of the robbers in the forest, and had heard him speak, it was impossible for him to know him in the disguise of an oil merchant. He told him that he should be welcome, and immediately opened the gates for the mules to go into the yard. At the same time he called to his slave, and ordered him, when the mules were unloaded, to put them into the stable, and to feed them, and then went to Morgana, to bid her to get a good supper for the guest. After they had finished supper, AliBaba, charging Morgana afresh to take care of his guest, said to her, "Tomorrow morning I design to go into the bath before day. Take care my bathing linen be ready, give them to Abdallah," which was another slave's name, "and make me some good broth against my return." After this, he went to bed. In the meantime, the captain of the robbers went into the yard, and took off the lid of each jar, and gave his people orders what to do. Beginning at the first jar, and so on to the last, he said to each man, "As soon as I throw some stones out of the chamber window where I lie, do not fail to come out, and I will immediately join you." After this, he returned into the house, when Morgana, taking up a light, conducted him to his chamber, where she left him, and he, to avoid any suspicion, put the light out soon after, and laid himself down in the clothes, that he might be ready to rise instantly. Morgana, remembering AliBaba's orders, got his bathing linen ready, and ordered Abdallah to set a pot for the broth. But while she was preparing it, the lamp went out, and there was no more oil in the house, nor any candles. What to do she did not know, for the broth must be made. Abdallah, seeing her very uneasy, said, Do not fret and tease yourself. Go into the yard and take some oil out of one of those jars." Morgana thanked Abdallah for his advice, took the oil pot, and went into the yard. When, as she came to the first jar, the robber within said softly, "Is it time? Is it time?" Though naturally much surprised at finding a man in the jar instead of the oil she wanted, she immediately felt the importance of keeping silence, as AliBaba, his family, and herself were in great danger. And, collecting herself without showing the least emotion, she answered, "Not yet, but presently." She went quietly in this manner to all the jars, giving the same answer, till she came to the jar of oil. By this means, Morgana found that her master, AliBaba, had admitted 38 robbers into his house, and that this pretend oil merchant was their captain. She made what haste she could to fill her oil pot, and returned onto her kitchen, where, as soon as she lighted her lamp, she took a great kettle, went again to the oil jar, filled the kettle, set it on a large wood fire, and, as soon as it boiled, she went out and poured into every jar, to stifle and destroy the robber within. When this action, worthy of the courage of Morgana, was executed without any noise, as she had projected, she returned to the kitchen with the empty kettle, and, having put out the great fire, she began to boil the oil, and, leaving just enough to make the broth, put out the lamp also, and remained silent, resolving not to go to rest till she had observed what might follow through the window of the kitchen, which opened into the yard. She had not waited long before the captain of the robbers got up, opened the window, and, finding no light, and hearing no noise or anyone stirring in the house, gave the appointed signal by throwing little stones, several of which hit the jars, as he doubted not by the sound they gave. He then listened, but not hearing or perceiving anything whereby he could judge that his companions stirred, he began to grow very uneasy. He threw stones again a second and also a third time, and could not comprehend the reason that none of them should answer his signal. Much alarmed, he went softly down into the yard, and going to the first jar, while asking the robber, whom he thought alive, if he was in readiness. He smelled the hot-boiled oil, which set forth a steam out of the jar. Hence, he suspected that his plot to murder AliBaba and to plunder his house was discovered. Examining all the jars, one after another, he found that all in his gang were dead, and, enraged to despair at having failed in his design, he forced the lock of a door that led from the yard to the garden, and climbed over the walls and made his escape. When Morgana saw him depart, she went to bed, satisfied and pleased to have succeeded so well in saving her master and family.